What if the great diplomatic language of the 21st century wasn't English or Mandarin but Nahuatl? Imagine if the heart of global finance wasn't New York or London, but the sprawling metropolis of Tenochtitlan, a city of floating gardens and solar-powered causeways. This is a vision of a world that was almost made, a future forged not by surrender in 1521, but by a victory that could have shattered an empire and redrawn the map of the world. This is the story of what might have happened if Cortés had been defeated and the Aztec Empire had survived. It's a journey into a history that almost was separated from our own by the thinnest of margins. Act 1. The Precipice of History. In 1519, the world of the Mexica, what we now call the Aztec Empire, was at the height of its power. This wasn't a monolith like a European empire, but a triple alliance of three city-states, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. From its incredible island capital, Tenochtitlan, a marvel of engineering with a population scholars estimate was around 200,000 people, the alliance held sway over millions. This was a civilization of profound contrasts, brilliant astronomers, sophisticated legal codes, and stunning architecture, yet its cosmology was also fueled by ritual human sacrifice and constant warfare. The empire's power was built on tribute and conquest, which had earned it plenty of enemies. Chief among them was the Confederation of Tlaxcala, an independent group of city-states to the east. The Tlaxcalans were locked in a state of near-perpetual conflict with the Mexica, a series of struggles known as the Flower Wars, which served complex strategic goals while also providing warriors with training and captives for sacrifice. They were a proud and unbroken people, and their hatred for Tenochtitlan was a powerful force just waiting to be unleashed. Across the Atlantic, a different kind of empire was on the move. Spain, fresh from its centuries-long reconquista, was hungry for gold, glory, and God. Its gaze was fixed on the New World, a source of unimaginable wealth. In Cuba, an ambitious nobleman named Hernan Cortés put together an expedition. His mission was, to put it mildly, unauthorized. He defied the governor of Cuba, Diego Velázquez, sailing after his commission had been revoked. This made his venture a massive gamble. Failure meant ruin and disgrace, but success promised legendary riches and power. In February 1519, with about 500 men, 16 horses, and a few cannons, he set sail for the mainland, stepping into the unknown. The arrival of these strange bearded men from the sea caused confusion throughout the Aztec Empire. The Tlatoani, or supreme ruler, Moctezuma II, was a deeply religious and calculating leader. He was faced with something completely outside his experience. A popular story, likely spread by the Spanish after the fact, claims Moctezuma thought the newcomers might be emissaries of the returning god Quetzalcoatl. But modern historians are skeptical. It's more likely Moctezuma was playing a political game, trying to figure out who these men were and what they wanted. His famously cautious response, allowing the Spaniards to enter Tenochtitlan in November 1519, is still debated. He may have been trying to assess their strengths and weaknesses from a position of control, but it turned out to be a catastrophic miscalculation. Cortés, sensing a chance, quickly took Moctezuma hostage, turning the emperor into a puppet. For months, a tense and volatile peace held with a few hundred Spaniards living like gods in a gilded cage, surrounded by a city of hundreds of thousands of increasingly angry warriors. The heart of the Aztec Empire was about to boil over. Act 2. The Point of Divergence. That fragile peace was shattered in May of 1520. Cortés had to leave Tenochtitlan to deal with the rival Spanish force sent from Cuba to arrest him for insubordination. He left his hot-headed lieutenant, Pedro de Alvarado, in charge. It was a fatal mistake. During the festival of Toxcatl, a major religious ceremony, Alvarado and his men attacked. Claiming he suspected a plot, Alvarado ordered the massacre of thousands of unarmed Aztec nobles and priests in the Great Temple. It was an act of butchery that lit the fuse of rebellion. When Cortés returned in late June, having defeated the rival Spanish force and absorbed its men, he found the city in open revolt. His expanded army was now trapped in the palace, besieged by a furious population. In a desperate move, the Spanish forced Moctezuma to appear on a balcony to calm his people. It was a disaster. The once revered emperor was now seen as a traitor. We'll never know exactly how he died. Some accounts say he was pelted with stones by his own people, while others claim the Spanish murdered him once his usefulness was gone. What is certain is that with Moctezuma's death, the last hope for peace vanished. The new Tlatoani, was a man of war, and he had one goal: destroy the invaders. This brings us to the night of June 30th, 1520. La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows. Trapped and starving, Cortés knew his only option was a desperate escape. Under the cover of a dark, rainy night, the Spanish and their Tlaxcalan allies tried to flee across the western causeway. They carried a portable bridge to cross the gaps the Aztecs had made, but they were weighed down by the massive amounts of gold they couldn't bear to leave behind. They were spotted almost immediately. War drums echoed across the city, and the lake swarmed with hundreds of canoes filled with Aztec warriors. The narrow causeway became a death trap. The fighting was brutal, chaotic. Men weighed down by gold were easily pulled into the dark water to drown. Horses slipped, arrows and spears rained down, and the screams of the dying filled the night. In our history, against all odds, Cortés and a fraction of his force fought their way out and eventually reached their Tlaxcalan allies. From there, they would regroup, rally more native allies, and return a year later to lay siege to the city, leading to its ultimate fall. But history can turn on a single moment. That desperate escape was the pivot point for the fate of a continent. So let's ask the question, what if they had failed? In our alternate timeline, the charge breaks down. The portable bridge, slick with rain and blood, collapses. The vanguard, led by Cortés himself, is swarmed. There's no miracle. The causeway becomes a tomb. In this version of events, Cortés doesn't escape to weep for his fallen comrades. He becomes one of them. Maybe he's captured alive for the sacrificial altar, or maybe he's simply overwhelmed and pulled from his horse. His key captains, Alvarado, Sandoval, Olid, are all cut down or captured. No one of consequence escapes. The breakout isn't just a disaster. It's an annihilation. The Night of Sorrows ends with the complete and total destruction of the Spanish expedition. The waters of Lake Texcoco fall silent. Act 3. A new timeline unfolds. Part 1. The immediate aftermath. The Serpent Triumphant. The next dawn in Tenochtitlan is one of bloody victory. The causeways are choked with the bodies of Spaniards and their native allies, their strange armor and weapons now spoils of war. Under the Tlatoani, the city celebrates. Captured Spanish captains, including a living Hernán Cortés, are sacrificed at the Great Temple. It's a powerful message sent across the empire. The Mexica gods are supreme and their people are invincible. The invaders were just men, after all. But this victory doesn't solve the most insidious threat the Spanish brought with them. Even as the city celebrates, a silent killer is sweeping through its streets. Smallpox. The disease, to which the native population had no immunity, had arrived with the ships sent to arrest Cortés and had already begun its deadly work. In our timeline, it ravaged the besieged city, killing an estimated 40% of the population and helping the Spanish immensely. In this new timeline, the epidemic is just as devastating. Cuitlahuac himself, the victorious emperor, still dies from the disease just months after his triumph. Here, though, is the critical difference. Without a Spanish army at the gates, the Mexica leadership, now under the young and fiercely intelligent Cuauhtémoc, can focus all its energy on the crisis. The demographic collapse is horrific, a great dying that sweeps across Mesoamerica, but the state itself doesn't collapse. It endures. It's a trial by fire from which the Aztec Empire emerges scarred and smaller, but sovereign. Cuauhtémoc, now leading a recovering empire, turns his attention to his enemies. The biggest threat is Tlaxcala. In our history, the Tlaxcalans sheltered the broken Spanish army and formed the backbone of the force that would conquer Tenochtitlan. But now their would-be allies are all dead. The news from Tenochtitlan is of a terrifying Aztec victory. The Tlaxcalans face a grim choice: prepare for a war of annihilation against a vengeful Mexica empire, or sue for peace. Here, Cuauhtémoc, a brilliant strategist, does the unthinkable. He knows his empire is weakened by disease and can't afford a long war, especially with the threat of more ships from across the sea, so he doesn't demand submission. He offers a new pact. He invites the Tlaxcalans to join a reformed Triple Alliance, not as subjects, but as senior partners. This isn't kindness. It's survival. The external threat of Europe has forged an unprecedented, if tense, unity. We can speculate this leads to the formation of what might be called the Nahuatl Confederacy, a united front of Mesoamerica's most powerful states. Years pass. In Cuba, the Spanish wait for news of Cortés. When none comes, they send a second, larger, and officially sanctioned expedition. But the world they find is not the one Cortés encountered. The Confederacy has had years to prepare. Coastal peoples are no longer welcoming. This time, the landing at Veracruz is met by disciplined ranks of warriors. More importantly, the Aztecs have had time to study their fallen foes. They have steel swords, crossbows, and even a few horses. They understand Spanish tactics. The second invasion is repulsed, a bloody and humiliating failure for Spain. A message is sent back to Europe. The Americas are not there for the taking. They are defended. Part 2. The Age of Adaptation, Forging a New World. The 16th and 17th centuries in this new timeline become an age of frantic and revolutionary adaptation. The Anahuac Confederacy knows its survival depends on closing the technological gap with Europe. This isn't about imitation. It's about selective, ingenious integration. The most pressing need is metallurgy. Mesoamerica didn't have an Iron Age, but the sight of Spanish steel swords and armor was a game-changer. Aztec artisans, already masters of gold and copper, would have begun the monumental task of reverse engineering iron. We can imagine the Confederacy launching massive, state-sponsored projects to find and exploit iron deposits. It would be a slow, multi-generational effort, but the existential need would drive it. By the mid-1600s, it's plausible the first Aztec-forged iron weapons would be equipping elite warriors. Gunpowder would also be a top priority. The few cannons and guns recovered from Cortés's army would be priceless blueprints. Mexica scholars would work to identify the components. Charcoal and sulfur were available. The real challenge would be producing saltpeter. But through trial and error, they'd likely figure it out. By the late 17th century, we might see crude Aztec artillery lining the walls of Tenochtitlan. The horse, the terrifying war deer of the Spanish, would also be a revolutionary tool. The few animals captured from Cortés's army would become the seed of a new war machine. Breeding programs would be established. The peoples of the northern plains, already skilled hunters, would become formidable cavalrymen, creating a unique Mesoamerican force blending horsemanship with the traditions of jaguar and eagle warriors. This technological revolution would trigger a political one. The old tribute system was inherently unstable. The constant threat from Europe would demand a more centralized state. The Anahuac Confederacy would likely evolve from a military alliance into a true federal empire. Perhaps the most complex evolution would be religious. The sheer scale of death from smallpox would have caused a profound theological crisis. Why did the gods allow this? While the victory over Cortés would have reaffirmed the power of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, the plague would have demanded an explanation. This cautious trade began with the outside world. Perhaps with English privateers or French traders looking for allies against Spain, the Confederacy would be exposed to new ideas. It's highly speculative, but one could imagine a gradual, internal reformation. A forward-thinking Tlatoani in the 18th century might argue that large-scale human sacrifice was now a strategic weakness. This wouldn't be a conversion to Christianity, the religion of the failed invaders. It might instead be a slow evolution of Mexica cosmology, emphasizing more symbolic forms of sacrifice. The impact on the rest of the world would be immense. For Spain, the failure to conquer Mexico would be a staggering blow. Without the colossal influx of silver from the mines of Zacatecas, Spain's golden age would be seriously tarnished. Spain's ability to finance its European wars would be crippled, which could have dramatically altered the outcome of conflicts like the 30 Years' War. While Spain would still receive a massive amount of silver from its mines in Peru, such as the Great Mountain of Potosi, the loss of Mexico's wealth would have reshaped European history. Other European powers, England, France, the Netherlands, would see Spain's failure as an opportunity. But instead of conquest, they'd be forced to pursue diplomacy and trade. Imagine European ambassadors traveling to a rebuilt Tenochtitlan, not as conquerors, but as supplicants seeking trade deals for cocoa and tobacco, forced to navigate the complex protocols of the Tlatoani's court. In this world, the Americas aren't a new world to be exploited, but an old one to be respected. Part 3. A Modern World Redrawn. As this alternate timeline flows into the 19th and 20th centuries, the Anahuac Confederacy would face the Industrial Revolution. Having spent centuries adapting foreign tech, it would be positioned to industrialize on its own terms, much like Meiji Japan did in our timeline. Picture the floating gardens of Tenochtitlan interspersed with factories powered by geothermal energy. its ancient canals filled with steam barges moving alongside traditional canoes. Tenochtitlan would become a modern metropolis, but one that remained uniquely Mesoamerican. The map of North America would be unrecognizable. The westward expansion of the United States wouldn't be a manifest destiny against scattered tribes. It would be a collision with a powerful, organized empire. The struggle for Texas, California, and the Southwest could lead to major wars between the U.S. and the Nahuatl Confederacy, creating a permanent, heavily fortified border and a continent balanced between major powers. In the 20th century, the Confederacy would be a major player on the world stage. It would have its own sphere of influence, participate in global conflicts on its own terms, and offer a genuine alternative to Western models of capitalism and communism. And so we arrive back at that 21st century we glimpsed at the beginning. A world where Nahuatl is a language of science and culture. A world where Mesoamerican philosophy informs global debates. Where art and architecture are influenced by the powerful aesthetics of the Mexica. This world wouldn't be a utopia. The Nahuatl Confederacy would have its own history of imperialism and its own internal struggles. But its very existence would have shattered the myth of European inevitability and created a planet where the dialogue of civilizations was a true conversation among equals. But that's just one way it could have gone. What do you think? How would a powerful Nahuatl Confederacy have navigated the world wars? What kind of alliances would it have formed? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into a history that never was, be sure to like and subscribe for more explorations of alternate timelines. Conclusion. The story of Cortés and the Aztec Empire is often told as a tale of destiny, of an old world fated to give way to a new one. But the reality is, the conquest of Mexico was never a foregone conclusion. It was a desperate gamble that hung on a knife's edge, dependent on alliances, disease, and pure luck. The survival of Cortés and a handful of his men on that causeway was not inevitable. It was a near miracle. By changing that one chaotic moment, the entire tapestry of modern history unravels. A single failure on a muddy causeway 500 years ago could have given rise to a world so different from our own, it's almost beyond recognition. It's a powerful reminder that the world we know was never guaranteed. What other single moments in history do you think could have changed everything?